Ellison. So before Dr. Ellison gets started, I just wanted to go over a few things with you all. I have put my contact information up there. Please feel free to write it down so that you can reach out to me. My email address comes straight to my phone. I will answer you pretty much from about 6 in the morning till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And you can expect to get an email back from me within just a few minutes. You all are my priority right now for getting online. And I know some of you are still struggling. I've looked in the Grade Center. We still have 9 of you who have not logged into the Blackboard site yet. Also, you can call me. That is my cell phone number. You can call, you can text if that makes you more comfortable. And then also there is the Ivy line, which is our 24-hour help desk that you can get assistance as well. But if you've not been able to get logged into Campus Connect with your C number yet to make an account, we need to get that done. And if you're stumbling there, I can't help you with that because that's an information security issue, and Ivy Line will have to help you with that. But once you have that established, if you're not able to log into Blackboard, then we have another issue, and that's where I definitely can help. So I want to show you, you should be looking at my Blackboard homepage, and if you cannot get to this point, and particularly if it is telling you that it doesn't recognize your username and password, I really need to know that. We've had a couple of instances across the college where students have not had everything sync up properly. And when that happens, I need to know so I can have the folks up at Central Office take a look. The other thing that will be helpful is I've also seen a couple of comments from students that sound to me like you're having troubles making posts to the discussion board. And the other big thing, piece of information that will be helpful here is don't use Internet Explorer as your browser. This is a Firefox page. You can use Firefox or you can use Chrome, but Internet Explorer has an incompatibility issue with Blackboard, and it really affects the discussion forums. So I'm just going to walk you real quick through posting. Political Science 101 60M should be on your home page when you get logged in. You'll see both my name and Dr. Ellison's as your instructor, but I am just here for support. So if you have content questions, he's your guy. If you have technical questions, I'm happy to help you. Are we out there, guys? I can hear a lot of talking. I want to make sure that you're following along.
Hello, North Harrison.
Okay, you guys out there? Okay. I just want to make sure you're hearing me because I'm trying to go over some things. That's cool. You were able to hear the beginning part where I talked about logging into Blackboard and getting some help.
The computer. It doesn't on here turn your audio on. No, that's chat board. In here? Yeah. Okay. We need someone in the room with a cell phone. I have a cell phone. Come up. Yeah. Actually, don't have any service. Just kidding. Yeah, there's over here. Call back to us that our audio is not on. So just hold on a second. Well, it's on, but it's in the cloud.
Yeah. Okay. Are you guys not able to?
Oh, yes, it's on here. Yeah. No, what? It's not plugged in. Oh, this one? Yeah. No, here. This one needs to be plugged in. Yeah. Oh, no, right there. Oh, right there.
You guys hear me now?
Yeah, we just plugged something in.
You have sound?
Yeah.
Very good.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Everybody can put it in, please.
Can we get started?
Awesome. Okay. So you saw my contact information, and please do reach out if you are having technical problems. I want to make sure you're getting logged in to Blackboard, and I am aware that sometimes you can get logged into Campus Connect but not logged into Blackboard. And if that's the case, I need to know right away so I can get your account looked at. So if you haven't even logged in yet to Campus Connect, and I see that 9 of you have not logged into the course yet, we need to get that set up for you. And then just to show you briefly getting logged into the class, this is your course's homepage. And when you first log in to Blackboard, you should get a page that has my courses on it. And you'll go to Dr. Ellison's. You'll see both of our names there, but I'm there for tech support. He's going to be the one to answer any of your questions about assignments and such. You'll see where he has posted announcements to you, and you'll want to scroll down and check out all of those announcements. This one right here with the link to the first 3 chapters of your textbook will give you access. We're working on getting you access to actual real books, but this will get you going on that content. And then there's a lot of important information under class sessions. One of them being that I have posted the archive links. And I know we had technical difficulties yesterday, so there are 2 links here for the archives from yesterday's recording. If one of them doesn't work for you, the other one should. If you are a Mac person, you may definitely want to consider the MP4 access, and if you're running Windows 8, I would consider the MP4 access. But try them both and see which one works out for you. And then the other question that I had to do with posting in the discussions. And one of the things that we know is a problem with Blackboard, Blackboard's aware of it, they just haven't been able to resolve it yet, and that is that it doesn't work well with Internet Explorer. So when you launch Blackboard, it will be most helpful if you use Chrome or Firefox as your browser. Safari will also work, but Internet Explorer causes problems. If you click on the Discussions button, and this is one of the places where we really run into problems, is when you go to create a thread. So we click on the Chapter 1 title, and I can see that we have 6 folks who have gone in and posted. And to create your post, you would click Create Thread, and then that gives you the opportunity to give a title, to write your message. You do have a spell check. Feel free to use that so that it's not going to catch grammar. It's not as perfect as Word, but you can spell check your work, and then you can submit that. And then when you submit it, it will show up in the listing. If you click Submit as Draft or Save as Draft, it will not show up in that listing, and Dr. Ellison won't be able to review your work. So the only other thing to point out, I think, this morning is if you aren't sure how to do something, if you click that Help button, it's going to send you to a website that gives you additional information. And clicking on Blackboard, if you're not sure how to do something, you can get a printed version of instructions, or you can view a video on how to do those. So I just wanted to review those few things with you this morning. I think, Dr. Ellison, was there anything else that you needed me to cover?
Textbook access beyond the first 3 chapters?
Yes, I'm working with our Amanda Felton here on campus to try and get us that access beyond the first 3 chapters.
Okay, terrific. Oops. Okay. Thanks, Lacey.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Ellis.
So I would like to do about 5 things before I get back to the PowerPoint. And by the way, we are, in terms of my presenting the material, we are basically on schedule. We'll probably start some of the Chapter 3 material next time, which is tomorrow. I realize some of you have not been able to log on yet, and some of you may be having technical issues, textbook access issues. So in the short run, please understand that the deadlines need to be softened, the deadlines for turning in your assignments, but that won't go on forever because you won't have access problems forever. So try to resolve those problems with respect to the technology in the textbook and get caught up as soon as possible. At some point, I will say to you, okay, the deadlines are now real and will be enforced. And that time is coming fairly soon. I'm going to guess probably 10 days. And you don't want to fall too far behind, because falling far behind can be a pain in the neck. So I understand that some of you are having issues one way or the other, and so we need to accommodate you, and we will continue to do so. So, you know, don't get all excited or worried or concerned, but understand that you need to address these. It's your responsibility to see that, to work with folks to see that you get the access that you need, whether it's to textbooks or whether it's to the, the websites. And again, if you have questions about that, you should be talking to Ms. Kusin, and you have her contact information. Number 2, the Declaration of Independence is in the back of the text. I don't reference it on the syllabus, and that's not a bad idea to read it. Believe it or not, the Constitution is not in the textbook in the back, which it usually is, but since you can find it on 87,000 websites, you should go to a website, a decent website, and read the Constitution. I know that you're all dying to read the Constitution, but here's the deal about the Constitution. We got people my point of view now, we have people running around the country acting as though they know it's in the Constitution and they've never even read it. And that's not a good thing. So the Constitution doesn't determine everything, but it's important to understand what exactly is and is not in the Constitution, and this second PowerPoint in part is designed to help you do that. So you should read the Constitution. Again, I don't say that you should do it on the syllabus, but you should. If you just read an article a day. Some articles are a lot longer than others. Something about my teaching methodology that you should be attuned to. Some people think that the world and that societies kind of move nice and smooth and easily, from one thing to another, and I just don't happen to be one of those people. So when I teach, I try to teach the conflicts or the contradictions that seem apparent, whether it's about in American government, American society, whether it's in life in in the town we live in. Because from my perspective, conflicts and contradictions drive change over time and help us understand in deeper ways what exactly is going on with what we're looking at. Number 4, does anyone at this point have questions or comments with respect to anything that we've done so far in the course? And this would include the technology issues or the content issues.
Yeah, what do you do? Go up there?
I hear you talking, but I can't hear what you're saying.
I have a question about the archive thing that she told about this morning. I've tried opening it up because I have my computer here with me, and it says a specific resource was not found when I tried to open it up.
What's your browser?
Google Chrome.
Chrome, and you're on a full computer, not like a little tablet?
No, ma'am, I'm on a full computer.
Would you please send me an email so I can work with you, and if you include a cell phone number that I can call you after school, I'll see what we can figure out.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. This is going to kind of be out of sync because probably most, if not all of you, didn't see the recording from last time, though you have had access to the PowerPoint. What I want to do is very briefly for a moment review a few of the key points that I think come out of the recording from yesterday, and then we'll continue on. I want to make 4 points. First, we talked about the importance of, and this is a contradiction, the importance, especially in the Declaration and in American ideology, the importance of natural rights, the idea of human equality, the idea of governments being a function of a social contract that human beings make, and that the consent of the governed is an important part of that. So we have those things on the one hand, but we have a society and an economy that's emerging in early America where at least half, if not more, of the state's culture, economy, and politics are rooted in slavery. And slavery and the recognition and acceptance of slavery is in fact found in the Constitution that was ratified in 1791. So there's a contradiction there. Either everybody is equal as a human being, or except for the slaves. Well, then that's a very problematic notion of human equality. Second issue, the Articles of Confederation. They were the first form of government that was established after the Revolution's success, and it was a failure. And we talked about the terms of the failure, and it's important to keep in mind what those were. And the most important thing in terms of the failure is that the Articles were a confederation of independent states, and the national government had very little power and was frankly not competent or efficient in any manner, and so even in the most basic manner. And so one needs to understand this as a kind of early American reaction to the experience of what was seen as a tyrannical king, and so the consequence was that the articles were created a very fragmented, totally decentralized, and relatively non-functional governmental enterprise that the framers came to the view needed to be replaced. Third point. Therefore, what the framers were fundamentally about in the Constitutional Convention and the struggle for ratification was creating a national government, because the Articles were not really a national government. It was a confederation of independent states. And so if you miss this, you miss everything about the Constitution. I tried to, in the PowerPoint, there's some mention of the various reasons, aspects of not only the failure of the Articles, but why the framers were trying to create a national government, a stronger but not too strong national government. Finally, number 4, we talked about how the Constitution represented a series of political compromises. The idea that the Constitution of the United States is not equivalent to Moses coming down with from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, or if you're Mel Brooks, 15. So the Constitution is a political document. It has all kinds of political consequences. It is not a neutral document. It was not designed to be a neutral document. It was designed to be ratified by the people and the states at the time, The other one final point, which I think gets lost in contemporary political discussion, is I quote the preamble to the Constitution in the PowerPoint. Read that, because it lays out, from my perspective, very clearly the public purposes of the Constitution of the United States. That is to say, what political purposes the framers were hoping to achieve by writing and ratifying and putting into place a new Constitution. So, I guess what I would then say to you, or maybe even admit to you, but I think this is where the facts lead me, is that American constitutional history at its early stages is primarily about creating a national government. Because under the Articles, the states were really dominant, and the framers were trying to move away from that. And I realize that there are a lot of folks out there who think contrary, but I don't think the facts support them. So, comments at this point. I'm ready to go back to the PowerPoint. I guess we have about 20 minutes or so left. I want to talk about some of this stuff you'll already know. A lot of this is not rocket science. It's very basic, but it needs to be said in any introductory class. So, constitutional design and principles. There are 3 things I want to talk about here: the separation of powers, checks and balances, and the federal system. And I'm going to take each one of these in turn in the slides that follow. The argument that I want to make to you is that if you look at the Constitution and each of these 3 aspects of constitutional design, one can discern the following principles that help define American government and politics. First, the framers were interested in designing a document where different interests were represented, even though there was a limited range of those interests, as we'll talk about later on, and the fact that different groups or different interests or entities are represented meant that from their perspective, political compromise was essential to the functioning of American government, just like it was essential to ratifying the Constitution. Secondly, the framers designed a fragmented, or if you prefer, divided and inefficient government. Americans and generally political commentators almost across the board bemoan the fact that American government is inefficient. I've already said this earlier in the course. The framers designed it to be inefficient. They didn't want efficiency. And they didn't get it. Thirdly, a key principle of our Constitution is anti-majoritarianism. What does that mean in English? Well, first of all, keep in mind that most adults, all women, all Native Americans, all blacks, many who own, probably most who didn't own property, had little or few, if any, political rights at the time the Constitution was ratified, and even for a substantial period of time thereafter. The framers designed a governmental system that made it almost impossible for a majority to even exist. And we'll talk about that as we go along. But they wanted to prevent the formation of majorities as much as possible, because a majority could abuse its power. A majority could do things to the minority that would be destructive. Another principle, limited government. A constitution itself, as we've already suggested, limits governmental power. And that was one of the principles that they're trying to achieve. And finally, very important, and I'll talk about this more in the federalism lecture, multiple access points, and therefore the difficulty in making political change. Multiple access points basically means this. If you have a political system where, let's say, ruled by a dictator or by a king, the king, Mel Brooks said it's good to be king. Mel Brooks, by the way, great political philosopher. So if you've got a king or you have a dictator, essentially all you need is one point of access. You get to the king, you get to the dictator, you get your political change. But if you have a decentralized and a fragmented political system, there are many places you can go. The greater the number of governmental institutions, the greater the number of layers, quote unquote, in a political system, the more places you can go to try to achieve your political goals. So these are some of the principles that come out of the Constitution that the framers designed. So first I want to talk about separation of powers. You know what this is. Separation of powers divides governmental power among several institutions that then can cooperate in decision making. Of course, we call these in the United States the Congress, or the legislative body, the executive or the president, and the judiciary. And the idea that the framers had was that in creating these separate governmental institutions, power would be balanced, and no single governmental institution or actor would have excessive control. So the legislative branch obviously makes the laws, except the most recent Congress. The executive branch is supposed to implement and enforce the law, the judiciary to interpret the law. You know all this anyway. If you don't, you probably would have failed out of high school already. Okay. So the legislative branch. Article 1 of the Constitution is on the Congress. Why did the framers start with the Congress? I'll give you a couple reasons. First, under the Articles, the Congress was, the legislative body, or the legislative branch was really the only functional branch of the government under the Articles of Confederation. Second, and more important, the framers wanted the Congress to be the premier policy-making body of the national government. And the largest article in terms of words and so on is about Congress as well. And Article 1, which describes Congress, lays out express powers, a whole list of powers. I believe it's Article 1, Section 8, that the Congress can exercise under the Constitution. That includes collecting taxes, borrowing money, regulating interstate commerce, declaring war, maintaining an army and navy, post office, and all the rest. There's a huge list of powers that are expressly given to the Congress of the United States. And I might add that in many ways the most important is taxing, raising or borrowing money, and spending money. People who say, Congress, it's a tax and spend Congress. Folks, that's what the legislative branch is supposed to do under the Constitution. So you should look at all those. I've only mentioned a couple here of powers that are given to the Congress by the Constitution, but clearly the most important is what political scientists call the power of the purse. Congress controls the money, both incoming money and spending of money. At the end of all of the powers that are concretely laid out in Article 1 for the Congress is the necessary and proper clause. And the necessary and proper clause is incredibly important and incredibly broad, because after laying out all these powers in Article 1, the Constitution reads as follows. This is with respect to the Congress. Quote, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution, the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. You can drive a 50 Mack trucks through this. This is a huge grant of power to the Congress. It's essentially what it's saying is, here are all the powers you have, and anything in the Constitution that is a legitimate power of government and that will help you do what you need to do as a Congress and as a federal government, you can do under the necessary and proper clause if it's part of implementing or executing the powers that the Constitution provides. So that is huge. That is an enormous, a broad grant of power. Comments at this point? Oh, one other point. I've never heard anybody mention this, and I only found out about it because I went back several years ago and read the Constitution. I mean, this is going to blow your way. Article 1 lays out, in describing the Congress, lays out the way Congress of the United States can impeach the President of the United States before the Constitution says word one about the President. Before they ever talk in the Constitution about what the President is and what the President's powers are, they first write down, here's how you impeach the President. That, to me, is a clear sign that the framers intended Congress to be the premier policy-making body. Okay, Article 2 is on the executive branch power. And at the time of ratification, there was debate about how strong the president should be. and most obviously did not want a king. Alexander Hamilton was in a small minority. And so there's not a lot of info in Article 2 about the president's powers, but the two key aspects of the president's power that are described in Article 2 are, first, to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Who passes the laws? The Congress. The president has to sign it for it to be, in most cases, to become a law, but the executive branch constitutional duty is to implement or to execute or enforce the law, and second, the president is the commander-in-chief. The president cannot declare war. That power is specifically, at least in the Constitution, given to the Congress of the United States. The judicial branch has the responsibility of interpreting the Constitution with respect to specific cases. We'll talk more about the judiciary later on. This is Article 3, and the purpose of the federal courts and the Supreme Court is to interpret the law. Supreme Court and federal justices have lifetime terms. They're appointed by the president, but they are confirmed or turned down only with Senate approval. So the Senate has to approve the president's nominations or appointments for the federal bench. And the powers of the Supreme Court are listed there. Two key points I want to make on the judiciary before we move on. One, the Congress of the United States creates the federal court system. That power is given to the Congress specifically in Article 1. And the Congress can therefore, if the Congress chooses not to create any additional federal courts or any federal courts other than the Supreme Court, it could have done so. So that's one piece. And the second piece I wanted to emphasize was one that I'm forgetting at this point. That's not on the slide. But the important thing is, right now, is that Congress creates the federal court system, and the second piece, and we'll talk about this more in a couple of weeks. The doctrine of judicial review is not in the Constitution, but becomes very important, and it's the first case. It's one of the early cases that the Supreme Court decides. It's Marbury versus Madison. I won't talk about judicial review now, but it's something to keep in mind because it is an important judicial power, even though it's not mentioned in the Constitution. Okay, we're done with checks and separation of powers. We're moving to checks and balances. These are the mechanisms by which each branch of government is able to participate in and influence the activities of the other branches. And in a minute, the next slide will, I think, will show some of these checks and balances, or maybe it's down the road a little bit. But the examples of checks and balances include the president's veto power over laws passed by Congress, the power of the Senate to approve presidential appointments, judicial review, which we just mentioned. Checks and balances was the method designed to maintain both the separation of and balance between the three branches. What checks and balances do is to give each governmental institution, legislative body, executive branch, and judiciary some powers over the other branches. So what the framers designed was a governmental system of separate institutions sharing powers. Sometimes those institutions and the political actors therein don't like to share powers, but the intent of the framers was separate institutions sharing powers, and that's important, and you should keep it in mind. Okay, this is an image from the textbook, maybe one of the older editions of the textbook, that shows some of these checks and balances. I've mentioned a few. I'm not going to go through them. You can look at them. There are many. And so you should pay attention to the various specific checks and balances that the Constitution provides. Whoops, okay. Okay, the third design feature we were going to talk about, remember we were going to talk about separation of powers, we did that. Checks and balances, we did that. The federal system. Political systems come in various shapes and sizes. Some political systems are parliamentary systems. Some are unitary systems, which mean basically that the national government is the most powerful governmental entity. The framers created a federal system. Federalism is a governmental system where power is divided by a constitution between central and subnational governments. Subnational governments have different names. In some nations they're called regions. Some places they're called provinces. We call them states and local governments. You know, whether it's a municipality, a village, a township, a county, all those are examples of subnational governments. One of the enduring aspects of our political system is federalism. Federalism has a number of advantages, which we'll talk about in the next on the material in the next chapter on the federal system, and a number of disadvantages. But this is a permanent and almost impossible aspect of the Constitution to change. We have national governments, we have state governments. Sometimes they cooperate. Often there's tension between them. Obviously, the high point of that tension was known as the Civil War. The Constitution, by the way, does not mention local government at all. Does not mention town government, does not mention counties, does not mention townships. These are all created by state governments. What a federal system does at its most basic level is make intergovernmental relations and policy and political conflicts important. What does intergovernmental mean? Well, we have 50 states. We have one federal government. What federalism does is create a political environment where there's interaction between state governments and between state governments and the federal government. That's what we mean by intergovernmental relations. Comments at this point? Okay, I'm going to try to do this last slide in 2 minutes. This is a really important slide. And I'm going to focus on the 4 bullet points below, and the first one. The Constitution was designed so that diverse constituencies were represented. And the way you can see this is the processes of election that were in the initial Constitution that was ratified in 1791. So, the way you can see it is first by the length of term that an official serves and the group that elects political or selects different officials. So, members of the House of Representatives are elected for a 2-year term by congressional districts and by the voters in the congressional district. The original Constitution provided that the Senate, those in the senators, would be elected for a 6-year term, and they still serve a 6-year term. The original Constitution provided that state legislators would elect senators, not the people, the state senators. So we have the House 2 years, the Senate 6 years, the House, the people electing, the Senate, state legislatures are electing. Then we have presidents elected by the Electoral College. What's the length of a presidential term? 4 years. And the Electoral College is a body of electors representing each state. The practice of the Electoral College has changed a bit over the years, but its existence remains important in presidential election politics. So these body of electors in the Electoral College are not necessarily office holders at all, and they only serve to elect the president under their original constitution. Federal courts and the Supreme Court serve for life. Members of the judges on the federal bench serve for life after being confirmed by the Senate of the United States. So what you see is every single political official, whether it's federal judge, whether it's the president, whether it's a member of the House of Representatives or a senator in the United States Senate, all of them have a different term, number of years that they serve, 2, 4, 6, and lifetime, and all are elected or selected by a different body of people. This was deliberate. And this is what I mean when I say that the framers wanted to design a system where no majority could ever form. And the example of that system, and we're out of time, so I'm not going to talk about it except just to mention it, is a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, you almost always get majorities. The framers designed a system where you'd almost never get a majority because the people who are doing the electing or the selecting and the length of term is different for every office in the federal government. We'll pick up on this next time. Thank you. Thanks, Lacey.